This week's episode has received the most backlash from fans that I've ever seen from Game of Thrones. I thought the writing in Season 5 was the most troublesome, but Season 8 has officially taken the cake. I have seen a few defending the decision of having Daenerys become the Mad Queen, but for the most part, viewers are not too thrilled with Dan Benioff and D.B. Weiss. These two are the show creators who convinced George Martin to make an adaptation of the Song of Ice and Fire series. They've handled the writing for almost every episode of Game of Thrones, aside from a small handful, and Season 8 is no exception. They let other writers handle the first two slower episodes this season, while they did all the writing for the final four. And it's been episode 3, 4, and 5 that have had the most problems. Creating a satisfying ending to Game of Thrones clearly became a more difficult challenge than they signed up for. The writing may have been problematic, but the directing and special effects are still the best I've seen from a TV show. We see a lot of the main characters' arcs come to a conclusion in this episode, which makes sense since it's the second last episode, but nothing felt organic. Their character development should not have taken them to this moment. I'm mainly referring to Bran, Jaime, and of course Daenerys. The episode opens with Varys' execution, so Melisandre's prediction has come true. She did say that they would both die in Westeros. Varys kept hinting at Daenerys' sanity, or lack thereof, in the last episode.
I worry about her state of mind.
We are advisors to the Queen. Worrying about her state of mind is our job.
He probably knew Tyrion would inform Daenerys of his plot to put Jon Snow on the Iron Throne, but he continued with his plans anyways. But Varys is only one of the major players to die in this episode. This was the big war with Cersei against Daenerys after all. Daenerys has Drogon completely destroy all the Scorpions, Iron Fleet, and the Golden Company. While I think the Golden Company should have put more of a fight, it's not like they stood a chance against a dragon, even if they are the greatest and most prestigious mercenary group with 20,000 fighters. Their leader, Harry Strickland, just looked pathetic in this episode. Tyrion did everything he could to try and convince Dany to not kill the innocent within King's Landing. He even released Jaime, who had been captured off-screen, in hopes he could convince Cersei to end this hopeless war. Up until the last couple episodes, Jaime had been the best written character in the show with the most depth and development, but his ending was so sloppy. There were better ways to have him by Cersei's side at the end, and there was no reason he should have stood a chance against Euron with only his left hand, even if he was fighting with Valyrian steel. Euron has been the most dependable and threatening ally to Cersei. If anyone was capable of defeating him, it should have been Grey Worm. Euron was responsible for Missandei's capture after all, so that would have been more fitting. Jaime failed in having King's Landing surrender to Daenerys, but they didn't need him to do that anyways. The Lannister army sees a defeated Iron Fleet and Golden Company, so lay down their swords, surrendering. And this is where the most controversial moment in the entire show goes down. Daenerys decided to destroy King's Landing anyways to inspire fear throughout the Seven Kingdoms, since she believed she would never have their love. I would be okay with this if there was more build-up to lead to this decision. This was not what her character was working towards. The writers just went with shock value over the sensible route. She may have just lost her best friend and one of her dragons in the last episode, but she has lost much more in the past, which only made her stronger, like the man who raised her in Braavos, her brother, her husband called Drogo, her unborn child, and even after Viserion's death and resurrection, she was perfectly fine, still trying to save the world. If all those moments instead psychologically damaged her and was a smoother descent into madness, this scene would have been more acceptable. While Daenerys is slaughtering innocent women and children and the city her ancestors built, a few more things are happening in King's Landing. Arya and the Hound are on an infiltration mission of their own. The Hound has wanted to kill his older brother the Mountain his entire life. He's been heartless and brutal to him and the rest of his family. The Mountain is even responsible for Sandor's burns. But the Mountain has always been stronger and larger, and with his new zombie body, he's even harder to take out. This fight was what I was looking forward to the most with this episode, and I wasn't disappointed. With no other way to defeat him, Sandor sacrifices himself to take his older brother out with him in the dragonfire below, while the Red Keep is falling apart. Before the brothers encounter, Sandor does convince Arya to put aside her hopes of killing Cersei. Obsessing over revenge for an entire lifetime has consumed him, and didn't want to do the same for Arya. He was perfectly fine knowing he will likely die trying to kill the Mountain, and didn't want Arya to throw her life away too. It was the collapsing Red Keep that took Cersei's life, while with her brother Jaime. Arya's escape from death did get a little repetitive for me, but it was fine. They really wanted to showcase what the civilians were going through by having Arya witness all the death and destruction. It seems like the only mortal few in King's Landing will have to face Daenerys in the last episode, and those will be Jon, Davos, Tyrion, and Arya. They all witnessed firsthand her cruelty and disregard for life. But it wasn't just crazy Dany doing all the killing. Their entire army joined in on the carnage. This was something the Dothraki were used to, and the Unsullied have unquestioning loyalty, but even the Northerners were in on it. I think some fighters from the Vale were also in attendance. Jon Snow had to personally kill one of his men for trying to rape a girl. They had to retreat behind the city walls because even they weren't safe with Dany's blind fire, so she's officially an antagonist for Jon, even though there's only one episode left to wrap up the entire story. I really think the season would have benefited from having 10 episodes. The Night King and the Dead Army deserved a bigger fight, and so did the Game of Thrones with Jon vs. Dany. I also wish Littlefinger was still around. He would have been thrilled with all this chaos to climb. I know a lot of people will be arguing that Dany destroying King's Landing had been foreshadowed all the way back in Season 2 with that vision in Karth while she was in the House of the Undying, but I don't think that's enough to justify her out-of-left-field, complete changing character. Targaryen madness had been mentioned multiple times throughout the series, but all her relatives who dealt with insanity had better reasoning. Her father, Aerys II, also known as the Mad King, went through many stillbirths, miscarriages, and children dying young. He was also left traumatized after being captured and held prisoner for 6 months. Dany's brother, Viserys, was overly sheltered by the Mad King and his mother. Aerys was afraid to lose him, like many of the babies before him, and his mother didn't want him to witness his father's erratic nature. So Viserys believed everyone calling his father the Mad King was just spreading propaganda, which made him seem a little delusional. Viserys also had to deal with surviving alone with his little sister at a very young age, since their parents died when he was like 8. He was mocked and belittled his entire life while believing he was a king. Is it very possible they were all just born mad, or it could have been life circumstances? George Martin leaves that out for the readers to debate and decide. But lastly, Bran's character arc is ending just as bad as Dany's and Jaime's. Why go through all the hardships and sacrifice to have him reach the Three-Eyed Raven and then fight to make it back home to do absolutely nothing but add trouble? There's one episode left to change that, so let's see if he decided to finally do something with his powers. The show is hinting towards Arya killing Dany with that ending this episode, but she already took out the Night King. Let someone else have the spotlight. I'm hoping for Bran to work into Drogon and just straight up eat Daenerys. That would be one hell of an ending. Are you guys on the side of the writers, or with the majority on hating what's going on with the final season? The comment section on all Game of Thrones related videos have been fun lately, and I'm sure this one will be no different. Thanks for watching, guys. One more till it's all over,